So this HR just drives me nuts. Like, oh, it's National, I don't know, Polka Dot Day. We're all going to make cupcakes tomorrow, and then we're going to sing Happy Polka Dot Day, and it's going to be wonderful, and it's going to really increase employee engagement, and I can't wait. And then they'll get really stressed out about it because nobody's buying into National Polka Dot Day. And I'm like, and that, I don't want to be associated to. So I had 2 jobs. So I had to tell one person, you're safe, you're good, this is your new role. And I had to tell the other person, unfortunately, you've lost a job, and I told the wrong person. Just slow down, stop taking it all so seriously. And that doesn't mean take the mickey, that doesn't mean laugh at everything. It just means be a bit human. So that when you're having difficult conversations, just pause for a minute. How would you like to receive this? Prior to having children, I'd look at working mums being like, why are you always in a rush? Why do you carry such a massive bag? And why is there always a stain on your top that you'll proceed to tell me it's because Freddie threw up? Like, why? Just sort yourself out.
So the way that we create the show notes, right? Full disclosure, we just go straight into AI, and we say,
so naughty. Is that modern or naughty? I don't know anymore.
It's time saving, but we always verify, and we've been caught out. Like we did Jane's, didn't we? And Jane said, "You've got something in there about screw fix or something." Like I've never done anything. Check a trade, and she's, "I've never done that." We're like, "Okay." So your actual intro was kind of pulled together by AI, and then we obviously tighten it up, etc. But it said there and there about theatre. Is that right?
Might be. Yes, it's a big love. When I had a choice, one of those sliding doors moments, and I was actually a scout in the audience that was like, do you want to come and be in a West End play, but you won't get paid? I did the wrong thing and was like, no, I think money's better. So then went into recruitment consultancy. But then when early 30s, I'd had my first child, and I think mothers go through, when they go back to work, they go through like what am I? You kind of do a pendulum, I think, when you first start. Like, it's all about baby and it's all about work. And I found myself again, but also guilt. And I was like, the thing that centers me is drama and theatre. So again, took myself to the local Amdram, this time in the sticks, because I no longer live in London, and turned up to this theatre, like this audition for a panto that was a mix between Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella. And I got the lead. But then the scariest thing ever is I found myself having to sing on stage, and I cannot sing. And I know people say, oh, I can't sing. I failed my grade 1 piano oral. Like that bad. That's how bad. And they got me a singing coach and all the stuff. So, and that's actually one of the bravest things I've ever done, is stand on stage. It won't be repeated, but stand on stage and sing a song. Yeah. So yes, it's a big love of mine.
Kate Thrumble has spent 20 years making workplaces more human. As SVP, Head of People and Experience for EMEA at Vayner Media, she shapes culture from the inside out, keeping the human experience central to every business decision. She believes work should be a place where people show up whole, leaders listen more than they talk, and where every interaction is an opportunity to connect, inspire, and make work feel meaningful. Kate brings energy, empathy, and heart to everything she does. Welcome, Kate. Thanks for joining us on the Sacred Art of Leadership podcast.
Hi. Thank gosh, I'm going to get emotional. You don't listen to somebody describe you often, do you? That would be weird, but yeah.
And you're not the first to say that on here.
Yeah.
Okay.
But how did me saying that out loud in front of you make you feel?
It just feels like you're talking about a grown-up. Do you know what I mean? You're talking about somebody else here. They must have their stuff together, that person. They sound really good. That was lovely. Thank you.
We always like to start with our signature opening question in every episode. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on, when you heard the title, The Sacred Art of Leadership, what did it say to you?
I immediately felt calm, because I think anything with sacred in feels precious and calm. And then when you combine that with leadership, you're like, is it sacred? And then you think about it and you're like, it is, and it's an honor, and it is something that is precious and delicate. And when you get to that leadership role, you often get there through, being all right at your job, being promoted, and suddenly you're in a proper leadership role. And I'd never really thought about it like that. It is sacred and it is precious. And perhaps if leaders reminded themselves of that more regularly, they may just pause and slow down a moment, and think about their decisions. Is it coming with judgment? There's something about the word sacred that I think removes all the judgy stuff and just allows presence.
You said something interesting there in terms of it should be more present in leadership. In your role and capacity as someone who works with people directly, how do you bring something like that to the kind of, do you put it into training, or how would you approach that?
Just reminding yourself it is almost like a privilege and it is sacred. And actually one of our competencies at Vayner is leadership. So it's across the board at every level. And one of the things I push, which is that kind of, it's less about the sacred, but it's more around the just slow down, stop taking it all so seriously. And that doesn't mean take the mickey. That doesn't mean laugh at everything. It just means be a bit human. So that when you're having difficult conversations, just pause for a minute. How would you like to receive this? And when you start to play around with that, then it does remove judgment, and it does make people think this is just human connection. But actually, I think, you've unlocked something there for me that I'm like, ooh, in that this is, it is a sacred thing, and it doesn't always feel like that. And you can be in a very reactive state, and it feels like something you just, I've got another badge at Brownies, like, oh, here we go, let's go, keep going. That's
unlocked something for me as well, because it's not just leadership where that, what you said about how would I pause for a minute and how would you like to receive that? That's like relationships, communication with partners, loved ones, it's every aspect of your life. That's a important thing to notice and try to be better at, I think.
Yeah, completely. That is, if you've got direct reports, that's a big deal. Their careers shouldn't be solely in your hands, otherwise we'll probably have some bias going on. But, that is a really important role to develop them and help them and let them grow, nurture them, shine through them, all those things.
Can I ask you about, going completely off script already? Meritocracy, like who gets to become a leader and how good a leader do you get on your leadership journey? I'd like to think that leadership or leaders, leadership as a broad term, kind of has a degree of, meritocracy to it. Like the good ones should be good leaders and the poor ones shouldn't, and everything in between.
Rise to the top. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'd like to believe that that's the case. And if that was the case, I would like to think if you're more human and you care more about connection and responsibility for your team, all of those really important things, that should make you a better leader and should get you further in your career. Is that true? And do you see it happening like that?
Well, let me just add one thing. So the human side of it is incredibly important, but I think the best leaders also balance that with results, because you also need to, you do everything with your team, push through, etc. But there have to be results attached to that. You can't just be the manager or the leader that's like, have another week off because, you bought a hamster. It can't, it won't work. So, so there's that element. I think there has to be a balance of kind of people and business, but a real balance and not a skew one way or the other. I think I've got a friend that works for a big, FMCG, let's put it that way. And there's leadership programs coming out their ears. Like it's thousands and thousands and thousands of people globally. And so you can't even get a leadership role unless you've done stints in other countries. Do I agree with that? I don't know, because not everybody is up for moving to another country, but you could be missing out on the best leader ever. But I understand the philosophy behind it. You're going to be more worldly. And so they have all this in place. So in theory, then their leaders have done all of this before they're even allowed through the gates of leadership. But a more kind of startup-y environment that scales very quickly, you end up with leaders at the top that have literally grown through the company. The pros there, they know the business inside out and better. What better mentors for people coming into the business? The cons, have they gone through the journey? But who's right on this? I think it depends on the DNA of the organization. And I think one thing that is needed is some form of like competencies or something that anchors everything, so that you can look at a leader and be like, okay, they might have the best sales record ever, but are they really living and breathing our curious mind, our leadership, or whatever those competencies might be? And often when you say competencies, it's like, well, that's just, jargon, isn't it? And whatever, but don't call it that then, call it something else. But some kind of anchoring, I think then, if you have an organization that really lives and breathes that, and everything is measured according to that, then I think that idyllic world which you just described will be in place. But do I think that's across the board, every organization? No.
It's fascinating because you're absolutely right. There are loads of leadership programs and you have to go through it. And I know so many companies that in order to get to the top, there's a pathway.
Yeah.
And the pathway tends to be more focused on what you mentioned earlier, the results side of things. How do we systemically, or how do we bring the human aspect back in to find that balance?
So you have to, it's because everything should be attached to the human behavior. So how we reward, or, there should be reward for actually the balance. It needs to be both. You can't just have this and none of this, either way. But so often, obviously, the sales side of things or whatever the business does, that's like, oh, you're doing well, therefore promotion, therefore pay rise, therefore. It takes a lot of guts to be like, yeah, you're doing all of that, but actually a team aren't behind you, and the way that you're leading isn't human, and people don't really like working with you. So no, we're not going to be rewarding at the minute until you nail this bit. It takes a lot because it's going to slow down the business. And if you think about this world, everything's working at 100 million miles an hour. So that approach is going to slow things down. But I think those businesses win.
That's a tough conversation as well, right? Because it's one thing to say, we need you to be more human. But does everyone receive and understand that the same way?
No. That's why you need that anchoring. And I really want a better word than competencies, but behaviors, you need that anchoring to be like, your version of human might be different to ours, but this is the business's version of human. So that then everything can measure to that. So you might think you're being the world's greatest human, but it doesn't match with what we place importance on. And that will be different for every organization. It's different for, even if you look at families, and I don't really enjoy that kind of business family thing. However, families are made up of different personalities, characters. They have different drivers. Some like going on adventurous holidays. Some like sitting in front of the TV, but they know what they align on. So as long as you've got alignment, better than competency. As long as you've got an alignment on the buzzwords that you're using or where you place importance in your organization, then I think you're halfway there. And then you will have leaders, back to your original point, Del, of like, that will rise up and they will be that fully functioning leader, I think. But they're still human as well. So they're not perfect.
So in that ecosystem of developing leaders within a company where their values, alignments, competencies are clear, is the benefit to the company the fact that you will get better results by leading in that way?
I think it's good for the company. I think if you've got really strong leaders that balance business and performance, the role modeling there for people lower down are like, oh, you can be nice and do things calmly and be kind, and you can have results as well. Oh, maybe I could do, how do I do that? And then they start honing it and fine tuning it.
But if I was a CEO, leader, founder, startup, building a new thing, and I don't care about everyone else having a nice time, I just want my company to succeed. Why do I care about the culture and the alignment of everyone and leading with humanity?
Well, this is the bit, because I think then if you're a founder startup, that's okay if that's how you want to run your business. But no, you might pay people really well. That might be your thing, right? You get your sales in, I'm going to pay you well. And then the DNA of that organization is going to be not one that I would want to work at, but people will, and that's okay, because people will be the people that don't want to connect. They're probably individual contributors and they will just go, and that founder might get the results they want. And I think that's okay. It's just not where I would want to go.
There's an interesting point that you make there in terms of what Derek was saying, because a lot of founders, they're not so much focused on that success, right? They're just completely myopically focused on what they want to achieve for themselves, right? They're passionate about what they want to get to. They're driven by that. And it's not always the money that drives them. It can be more than that, right? I know that when Derek and the guys built their company, they were driven to build a business within their industry that was completely different. Almost like, correct me if I'm wrong, right, Del? It's kind of like you'd seen how it had been done badly and they wanted to do it right. And I think there's a piece where those founders attract those kind of people. But as it grows and expands and you get more people and you get more people and it gets there, how does that, how do you keep that human aspect? How do you keep that DNA throughout?
I think by having the kind of anchorage. So, but that will vary founder to founder. Like one of where I work is founder led, and one of Gary's big things is kind of having a growth mindset, thinking beyond the task in hand. That means one of our competencies is growth mindset, but you might not find that in a different organization where the founder places value somewhere else, I think that's why I think it just needs to be tightly aligned, because what can happen in those scale ups is then founder hires in CEO who's got a totally different view of the world. And then that's when the people that join, they're like, wait, what? It doesn't work. So if you have that anchorage, then I think that it's going to help.
What's your take on humanity, the human aspect, and authenticity of leaders?
I just think it's so important. I think it's incredibly important, but it has to be authentic. Like you can't be a leader that's like really actually horrible and then send something like, I'm just being my authentic self. I'm just quite direct. And it's like, there's a difference between being direct and like being horrible. I think that humanness, the authenticity is really important, because I think it enables psychological safety, because I think people know then I can make a mistake, but I learn quickly and I move on. It's okay to be human. And I think, and it's a balance, but people have a life outside of work, and of course it's going to impact work, and people go through things. It's being consistent and being human. They're the biggest bits for me. And the authenticity, hugely important. I think particularly in like a founder-led organization as well, where you can see the man or the woman, it has to be real. And then you either buy into that or you don't.
So if as a leader, I'm authentically a massive dick, how should I show up in the workplace?
You shouldn't run a company.
Fair.
I think self-awareness is a big thing that is like, if I had like, if I think about brownies, I don't know why that's in my head today, but like the badge, the sash, right? And if it's full, then you are the best leader. I think self-awareness is one of those badges, like real self-awareness, and not weaponizing it, not hiding behind it, like real self-awareness. And then that person be like, do you know what? I'm not very good. Let's say they're not very good at people skills because actually they're just focused on running the business. Then they have to hire a right-hand person who is excellent at that, but might not be strong at the other things. They have to play the team it well. And then it won't really matter, because as long as there's trust there, that leadership team will then kind of build a rapport with said dick and, be able to kind of shield, but also manage, and there will ultimately be trust there. But if they then don't even trust those people, I don't think the business would do very well long term.
I loved, you also said something that sparked my curiosity. It's about weaponizing self-awareness. What does that look like?
Like the direct example, or the best one is, I'm this nationality and therefore, and it's like, no, no. It's that. It's like, oh, I know myself, but it also enables behaviors that aren't good. But because I'm saying it out loud and I'm owning it, it's making it okay, not okay.
What's the biggest misconception people get when they kind of like about that role that you hold so passionately, the head of people? What's the biggest misconception out there that people just don't understand?
I often get, so I can only speak from my own experience, the trust thing. Oh, I didn't realize I could trust the people team, HR, whatever we're called these days. I didn't realize I could be so open. Oh, I didn't realize we could use you for that, like running a workshop or, dealing with a business issue. And so the perception is a back office function. And I would never work anywhere where it's a back office function. It's just not who I am. Some people love that. They absolutely see me on your first day, last day, and I'll send you your paperwork in between. Delightful. That is not, that's definitely not me. I'd get fired at that job very quickly.
So if you could redesign the whole system,
yeah,
the whole kind of like leadership system, the leadership team, the structure, etc., what should it look like in your mind?
I think Lego have done it. I spoke to somebody at Lego, and the way they have structured, kind of thinking with my HR hat on, their C-suite has they called it like a sparring partner. So like their CMO would have effectively like an HR lead, but that HR lead doesn't have a team underneath them. They have resources. So they'll have like a learning and development function. They'll have a comp and bends. They'll have all those things. But that C-suite leader has their sparring partner that looks at their unit. And I think I've probably used this analogy before, but what I do, and I don't really ever call it HR, but it is like that. You think about like Premiership football team. For me, the role is the coach. So you're alongside the manager, leadership team, whatever, in the box. They can't come out of their box. You've then got the players on the pitch, and there's individuals and there's teams within that team, and then there's the whole team. And I think, and I'm quite passionate about it, that the role of the people function is that coach. And so they're neither one or the other, but they're seeing everything and they're working alongside all. And I think Lego, from what I hear, have absolutely nailed that.
And interesting you brought up Lego, because as far as I'm aware, Lego is still privately owned by the husband, by the family, by, let's say, Mr. and Mrs. Lego, because I love the idea that
imagine being part of that family.
Can we get them on here?
Yeah, right.
Come on, I'll come back for it.
But is that sort of sense of private ownership? Does that lean in? Does that give you more flexibility to build that kind of perfect? Not perfect, but fit for purpose leadership ecosystem for the future, compared to private equity or publicly owned companies who are really having to be focused on the next quarter's results?
I think it depends who you are as people. I would imagine Mr. and Mrs. Lego, generations back or wherever we're on now, family Lego, have had to let go a little bit, but have had to make it clear we never compromise on X, Y, and Z. Back to that anchoring, like this is what we do and how we do it. And we never venture from that.
And just while we're crossing the I's and dotting the T's, I noticed that you were slightly, I don't know, uncomfortable is probably too strong a word, but your terminology of HR and how we refer to HR these days, I've always felt uncomfortable with that, because humans aren't just resources, right? What do you call it? What would you call it? Is there a better terminology that we could adopt?
Yeah, I would call it. So if we were working for Kate & Co., I would call it people acceleration, because So when this podcast becomes massive and you need HR, that's what we're going to call the team. I always call it people acceleration, because I think that involves like a two-way bit, right? You've got to put your foot down to drive. It's not just, you can come work for us and do nothing and we'll give you massive pay rises and we'll promote you. It's a two-way partnership. So I think people acceleration, personally, I'd have people operations, which is the stuff. And then I would have people acceleration.
You touched on something there. There's that point at which you're growing and you bring in all the functions, right? The people accelerators, do they get brought in at the right time?
No, always too late.
Yeah, right. Can you speak a little bit more about your thoughts on that?
It's tough, isn't it? Because I'd say like 0 to 50 headcount, you do need somebody that's going to find your systems, make sure people get paid, that kind of stuff. But I'd say at that point, I would highly recommend a founder to getting from that 0 to 50 to have a coach. So I don't think you need people acceleration at that point, or indeed a full-time in-house person. But I do think from first employee onwards, you need a coach. You need that sparring partner. You need that. So, and then I think from probably around the 50 to 100, that's where I'd start looking for that billions person, or that kind of role. And I probably would hire them at about the 100 mark. But by that point, I'm going to have had the coaching. All the systems are going to have been in place. So it's a nice environment for that person to join to then elevate. I think, I spoke to a founder once and they said, I got up and, would go to a WeWork equivalent and, that was all fine. And then it suddenly got very real when we hired that first person.
Mm-hmm.
And it says a lot for actually the character of this lovely founder, but the kind of weight of that and like, oh my gosh, this person's whole job and life and everything, it feels like it's in my hands. I need to start being a bit more, what am I doing here? And this has now become a thing. You need an outlet as you're going down. That's employee number one. So that would be what I would say would be the right way, I think.
I can see Derek nodding vigorously. What's your experience, Del?
Well, it's just exactly that idea. The fact that you've simplified what is a very complex and messy growth plan for a startup into actually, I think what you've said will work 9 times out of 10. And I'm surprised. I've never really heard it put so simply, beautifully as that. So you'll tell me more about your startup journey. What happened there? And have you got another one in you?
My little stint. I think that I was quite keen to get out of the industry I was working in before, and it felt new and shiny, which it was. And there were 3 founders, very different personalities, really lovely people, very young organization. I think what they wanted was a Wendy from Billions. What they needed was traditional HR. And so I found myself having to do jobs like and then, by the way, do jobs isn't me being precious, but like do jobs like set up how our visa sponsorship process. Even saying that sentence makes my head hurt. Like it's not, it wasn't fulfilling for me. And I don't think they had a problem actually, but it just wasn't, I was like, I don't know what I've done here, but really good bunch of people, great drive, and amazing insight into a startup, but I missed home, which was this wild and wacky industry that I seem to have found myself in.
Something that Del and I are really we're passionate about, right? Both of us. There's something that Del and I both agree is the role of women in leadership, motherhood and leadership, and women come back to work, etc. And it feels like that the world is asking for something specific or something more from female leaders at this time. What do you think that is? Or do you even agree? Do you even agree with that?
I don't agree with you. I don't. I think they're asking more of leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I think more and more it's like, I think the days of ivory towers are not around so much anymore. So many organizations. Daily it's like thousands of people are losing their job, whatever, which means leaders need to get down and dirty as well as being strategic, which is a tough gig to do it for particularly big organizations. So I think there's more demands on leadership than I think there ever have been. I don't know if I would, maybe it's just the world I operate in, but I don't know that there's more demands on women. And what I would say though is then stereotypically is naturally more demands, because stereotypically there might be a family, there might be a whole other thing going on of which the woman carries the mental, generally stereotypically, blah, blah, the mental load with that. So it feels like there's more on women because of that whole package if they're in that situation. But I wouldn't, from my experience anyway, I wouldn't say there's more demanded of women. I think it's weird, isn't it? I think we've come a long way. I think I look at leadership teams and there's certainly a better, healthier mix than when I started in leadership. I mean, I was about 28, 29, and I was the only female around the table, and all the men were at least 15 years older than me. And yeah, I feel like there's been a conscious effort to move beyond that. And I think women have stepped more into their power. I don't think it's been a case of the men will let you in now. I think women have been like, enough. This is who I am. That's what I bring. And you kind of don't have a choice because they're great. There's some brilliant female leaders. And gone are the days, I think when I first started, a lot of the female leaders lent into masculine ways of being that they were clearly unnatural, uncomfortable, because in my role they'd then come and cry in my office and I'd be like, cry out there, let them see the tears, and I think that has changed a lot as well.
I'm going to ask a controversial question because
that's what Del does.
That's where the interesting thing happens sometimes. In my company, we were very focused on closing the gender pay gap and making equal opportunities for everybody. And we found, I hate to generalize, so sometimes, more often than not, with the women in our workforce who had children who were coming back to work, when their kids were sick, nearly picking up from school, from nursery, something unexpected had happened, it would often be them that would have to leave the job to go and do that because their husbands were at work. Now, how come? And also, what could I have done in my company about that? Like, it's just a tricky one, right? If you're focusing on results, it makes you think about employing a guy instead of a mother, right? Which is madness.
No, I think there's a few bits there. I think the world won't be fair until maternity and paternity are exactly equal. And even, my husband and I did shared for my second child, and he was so nervous about even raising the topic. I'm like, what do you think I did for our first, sorry. What? And actually going through it. And I think the more reps we get on that and where it's equal, like it's whatever your standard is as an organization. If you're a man, female, whatever, it's just, then that will start to shift things, because then suddenly those men that are CFOs or the decision makers at the top will know what that feels like. And therefore, I think that will help. But I think it's interesting, the point around it's always the mum that goes. I've just back from a weekend away with school friends that I've known since I was 11. And I'd say, if I relate to them what you just said, some of them would be like, I want it to be me. I have this maternal thing. My husband might be able to do it, but I want to be the one that's like wiping the sick away or whatever. I don't feel like that. My husband and I have a deal of like, we live outside of London. If you're the one that working from home, you have children. If you're the one in London, you do not have children, which means if there's a school, they're both at school now, but like school call, whatever, that's on you, not on me. And I carry no guilt or anything to do with that. But it took me a long time to be okay with that as well, because I think there is this, but you're the mum. Like it should be you. But I think a better understanding as of the person, because there might be dads out there that are like, I want to be the one to leave this meeting alley to go and get my kid, but I don't feel I can because then I'll look like less of a man doing that.
And there's something much wider. I mean, when I was working in the city, there's so many things I missed, right? In my kids growing up, there'll be the school assemblies and there'll be the performances. There'll be all sorts of things I was missing. And I look back and I think it didn't even cross my mind to think differently at that time. It was just a given. And you mentioned earlier about this stereotypical, right? This word stereotypical. And it comes back to that. How do we crack these stereotypes? How do we normalize it so that it isn't no more considered a stereotype?
I mean,
or do we need to accept that the benefits of having women coming back to work after having kids in the workplace is so important that what comes with that is sometimes they're going to have to nip off early to pick up their kid from school? Like, is it as simple as that?
I would go with that, but also be okay with dad nipping off early, and maybe they've come back a slightly changed person. And actually, if they took the 6 months out in the same way, they might come back feeling slightly different. For our first child, I think my husband got a couple of weeks. Your whole life has changed, but you've had 0 time to process that. So I think if those changes can happen, you might find they come back a little bit different as well. But the shame of it has to go. I don't know if shame's the right word, but like from the male point of view of like, excuse me, could I take some time off to have a child? Like it has to go. But now the argument, I got into quite a heated debate with a colleague who I love dearly, who I don't work with anymore, but not because of this, but she doesn't want children. She's never wanted children. She doesn't want children. And she said to me after my second child, and I took off 6 months, and she said to me, when do I get my break? And she was like, I know how you're going to react to that, but when do I get my just tapping out? Like, I don't need to be in this environment anymore, but I can then come back to this environment. And I didn't really know what to, I was like, when you have major operation, like that's when you can have your, like, I don't know what to compare it to, because I think that's where sometimes businesses get in a sticky point, because unless you've been through it yourself, you can't fully understand it. And there's nothing else like it. And and people say, oh, I've got a dog. And it's like, I just don't think a dog's ever going to be viewed in the same. I have a dog too, and I love him dearly, but I don't think it's ever going to feel in the same way as a child. So it is quite complex. But I think the more even we can make the rules of play, the rules of the game, then the better chance we stand, I think.
I was just going to observe actually that you said that the shame around a guy tapping out for paternity leave or to pick up their kids, which is obviously true and needs to be changed. But also, I've noticed that amongst women in my team, where at 5 o'clock they're feeling guilty because they've got to go and pick up their kids from school. Like, it's just I don't know what more I could do to encourage all people to be like, family comes first.
Measuring it on output, isn't it? I think, and that's where businesses go wrong, I think, is like, you need to be in the office 5 days a week, you need to be working 9 till 6, blah, blah, blah. But simplistically, if we just properly measured people on output, then would it matter if they left at 3 to go and pick up their child? Because I tell you what, 90% of those people, male or female, back online, over delivering later on that
Absolutely.
evening.
Absolutely. And that comes back to our opening conversation really about results and how it all does need to lead into results, and whether this sort of maybe new wave of leadership should generate better results. I feel like it did in my company, and I'm surprised more companies aren't seeing that. I mean, is it generating greater results in your company now?
I think it's beneficial because I think it attracts a more diverse workforce. And I think naturally through a more diverse workforce, there is better work, and there's more brains on it, more different brains. And I think that's the strength there.
Can I ask you, how did motherhood the experience of motherhood and coming back to work shape that leader that you were then to the leader that you are now?
With my first child, I think, so what was I when I had her? I was 30. And I think it made me feel like a grown up. I think it was a badge. If I'm being really honest,
Yeah.
It was a badge of, I love my daughter and I love being a mother, right? But I think a little bit in the workplace, I couldn't wait to say, yeah, my daughter at home, because I'm a grown up and I do grown up things like having children. And so that, I think it helped me have confidence, I think, because, and lots of mums will say, it made me more efficient and blah, blah. I think I've always been quite an efficient person. So I don't think I gained that. But I think for me, it helped me step into myself more. And maybe a little bit more empathy, actually. Like, as scandalous as this is, I think prior to having children, I'd look at working mums being like, why are you always in a rush? Why do you carry such a massive bag? And why is there always a stain on your top that you'll proceed to tell me it's because Freddie threw up? Like, why? Just sort yourself out. Like, very judgmental in my head. But having a mother, then you just get it a lot more. And I think a lot more compassion than I perhaps had before that. And then my second child, I don't think made any difference at all. Just was, I think, because there's a 4-year age gap. And so I think the first had been such a big, that's just who I am. And so you just add another one into the mix, really. But I'd probably grown a lot as a person in that time as well.
And I'm going to take the stereotypical male leaders out there, what do they need to hear? What truth do they need to hear to get them to stop and think?
It is so hard because there's also a reality. Like, I spoke to a friend this morning, a mutual friend actually did, but I spoke to a friend this morning and he's just hired somebody in his team. She's been there 2 weeks and she's told him she's pregnant and she goes off in October or whatever. And I feel his pain. I feel it. He's like, oh, I've got to get cover and then I've got to get her maternity, and it is painful. So, but I feel it on the impact of the business is really hard. I don't know what every male leader would need to, and I wouldn't say it's every. I think some are really in tuned. Some have clearly married brilliant women as well who have taught them a lot. And I think you're finding more and more people now where both have proper careers and they're making it work. And that doesn't mean they're billionaires. They're literally both doing school pickup and, whatever. And I think that has helped a lot. There's more women in the workforce. There's more kind of couples where they're both striving and doing their thing. And I think that has changed some perspective. I don't know. It's a tough one.
It is a tough
Can I
one.
share a little example? We just, for context, we hired a sort of a hotshot artist once. And when she came to us for her sort of final interview, she told us, to her credit, that she just got pregnant. And was like, if you don't want to hire me, like, I understand, bless her for being so honest. And we had a moment of like, oh my God, that's going to be really expensive for us for a while. But then we had obviously had a word with ourselves and realized the right way forward was to continue with her hire, which we did. And she turned out to be the most amazing hire. Loyal, brilliant, like so grateful that we took a chance on her and supported her through that. She would do anything for us. We would do anything for her. It was just a beautiful relationship. So, on the spreadsheet, it probably didn't make any sense, but in the overall culture of the company, like that compound, she tells everybody about how we did that. And so the recruitment strategy helps, the talent retention strategies benefits, it just costs us a bit more money for a few months. It's hard to quantify, isn't it? How, going back to HR, if we may, just for a minute, because we, I actually
people acceleration, duh.
People acceleration, which I love that. For the listeners here who are white knuckling it without professional HR support, or those who have traditional HR that we were talking about earlier, does human-centered leadership, all the things we're talking about now, what we think is good leadership, does that change how decisions are made around hiring, but particularly firing? And if it's time for someone to be let go, does it happen in a different way in an organization which is heart-centered? What does that look like?
I mean, it does in so many ways, because it does when you're working with the manager. I will often say, well, firstly, I'd be like, listen, we're a tag team. This is your thing here and your decision and whatever. However, if you lose your way, I've got you. So whereas I speak to some friends at companies where there's perhaps more traditional HR and they're like, HR said nothing in the room. And I'm like, you what? Like, what is the point then? Just what? Or just course corrected on legal flags, and that's not that coaching partner to me. So I think there's that. So that's making the manager feel good. And I often say to people, this sounds awful, but give people the best, worst experience you can. No one wants to be that side of the table. It doesn't matter how we got here. It doesn't matter whether it's a restructure or this person is just not very good at their job or they're in the wrong job or whatever. No one wants to be that side of the table, even if they've hated working here. So this isn't about you, because often I've found managers can lean into like, I'm so sorry. And I know I was so stressed last night thinking about this conversation. You're like, it's not about you. It's about the individual. And let's give them the best, worst experience that we possibly can. And here's how we're going to do it. And so I will write scripts for the manager, but I'll also be like, rip it up. Please don't be reading from a script and make it your own. And also the safety of I'm in the room, there's not a lot you can say that's wrong. And once you give people that, just be a bit human about it, it does just relax a bit. And that's, tough, really tough, but that helps. And that for me is a human-centric organization, putting in the effort and energy to bother with that rather than it's just a number, let's get rid.
And you've articulated that so well. And I think that's why it shouldn't be a back office function. It's a partnership. It's a genuine partnership. It's a genuine leadership partnership role.
Yeah.
Well, people's 60% of the cost of most businesses, like it's the biggest cost in every business, almost every business. Yeah. So how come the person responsible for that cost doesn't get a seat at the table? It seems madness to me. And I think we were guilty of that as well.
It's the thing you said, right, Dale, at the very beginning, the first episode, you're saying that the biggest, you came to learn that the biggest strategic asset of the business is people.
If you don't have that insight, you don't have that data that's informing your business decisions, then it's like you're missing a limb, in my opinion. But also data is a good point. I think HR, I will often mock this, but the other reason why I sometimes I am proud of what I do, but I'm not necessarily proud when I say I'm in HR because of other people's perceptions of it.
Because of the weights, yeah.
Yeah. And so this HR just drives me nuts. Like, oh, it's national and like polka dot day. We're all going to make cupcakes tomorrow and then we're going to sing happy polka dot day and it's going to be wonderful and it's going to really increase employee engagement and I can't wait. And then they'll get really stressed out about it because nobody's buying into national polka dot day. And I'm like, and that I don't want to be associated with. Data is incredibly important in the people function. And that data, if you think about that accelerating piece, it's like you're not going to move unless you've got the right data informing it. And also the data helps, I think, HR remain neutral. Although we're humans too, of course, we're going to have feelings, emotions, thoughts, intuition. Data is really important.
I just wanted to quickly touch on before we move towards to closing up. The point you made about generations, millennials, etc. What's your views on that in terms of?
It is hard, but I am a millennial and I remember entering the workforce and it was millennial bashing time. It was like, oh, as millennials, I think we were entitled. I think that was our rap. And I had to fight against that and fight and push. What I think is the difference between millennials and Gen Zs is Gen Z is like, I'm not fighting this. This is who I am. So bye. Whereas I would minimize myself to fit in with the generation above. Well done them. They're not doing that. They're like, okay, this isn't for me. I'm just going to protect myself here and I'm tapping out. Or I'm actually going to have a brave conversation with you because that's me being true to myself.
How do you think that Gen Z attitude is impacting or shaping the workforce now then?
I'm fascinated when some of them are CEOs now, but when they are the next CEO of huge organizations, not 50-person startup, big ones. I'm fascinated to see what they do. And will they, all the things that they are rightly asking for now and placing importance on, will that remain true when the business is theirs to run? And how will it run? I don't know. I'm so curious.
Yeah, I agree.
And what about the friction between let's say, Gen Zs and the organization that they're part of? Before they get to be the leader of it, they're having to there's a meeting, there's a compromise of values and minds there in a way that I've never experienced before. That's something, to your point, like most of us kept ourselves small and just tried to fit in. That's causing challenges for leaders now in a way that's never caused challenges before. How do we navigate that?
Output, I think, is the simple answer. Does it matter? Does it matter? Like all the demands or everything that's being painted in such a bad light. It will matter if you're not performing. Yes. But does it really matter if you really center your business on outputs? Sometimes I think we over-engineer and make these things.
I wonder if that's what they want as well. That very simplistic, look, this is what we've hired you to do. This is what we need you to do. Go do it. And then when they've done it, go, I've done it now. Can I go home?
I'm no expert in generations or psychology, but if you think about the world they've grown up in, everything's at the speed of the internet. I want something, I'll order it, it comes through the door. They want it quickly and they want it simply. So tell them the rules of the game clearly and simply. And I think they play. Like, I think it's when we try and make up weird rules that don't compute for them. They're like, why would we do that when we can just get there quicker? Because that's the environment that they've grown in.
I've got one question from our list that I'd love to just put to you out of context. We do the quick fire at the end. And back to that HR when you're in the room. I think most of us, certainly inexperienced leaders in that situation, are mostly terrified of saying something wrong. And have you got an example of when you got it wrong with someone? What did it cost you or them, and what did it teach you?
When I got it wrong.
Have you ever got it wrong in those situations?
Oh, many, many times. I'll tell you my favorite. I worked in publishing.
Oh, I've heard this one.
Yeah, it's a good one. I worked in it's amazing. I'm still employed. I worked in publishing at the beginning of my career, and I have been very blessed throughout my career to have amazing managers. And my manager just chucked me into a redundancy situation. And the idea was that we had one role on one magazine, one role on another magazine, both junior, and we were going to turn them into one role that would service both magazines. Quite a simple business case. So I prepared and very nervous, but composed. And I ended up telling so I had two jobs. So I had to tell one person, you're safe, you're good, this is your new role. And I had to tell the other person, unfortunately, you've lost a job. And I told the wrong person. So I then so I went out and told my manager, and she did the best thing she could have done. She was just like, and what do you think you need to do? And I was like, I think go back in and do something, when I really wanted her to just save it for me. And so I went back in, and the girl that was just on the phone, I remember it, so it makes me feel sick. She was on the phone to her boyfriend explaining the good news. And I had to be like, can we talk? And so she put the phone down, and I was like, I'm really, really sorry. I've made a huge mistake. No excuses. Here we are, and just said it how it is. And the worst part was she got up to storm out, and she tried to slam the door, but it was one of those really slow moving doors that don't slam. And so the whole thing was just awful. But what I learned from that was, if you make a mistake, you've got to face it. If you need to say some bad news, you just got to say it. There was no point me being like, this thing, it's a bit of a small thing, but I'm really sorry, and just don't faffing around, just get to the point. And actually that exact example I have shared with every single direct report I've ever had, which gives them absolute grace and permission to be like, beat me. Like, I dare you. So I'd put that down as, an almighty mistake, and definitely said the wrong thing.
and probably one of the best lessons you've ever learned, right? Yeah,
I would say so. Yeah.
So we like to go through what we call like 5 quick fire questions. Honest answers, no overthinking, straight from the hip, right? So what's a book, film, show, or a piece of art that impacted you most and rewired how you see the world?
Rewired how I see the world. Okay. I think I can't remember the author. I read it last year. It's a book called, I think it's called A Small Boat or Small Boat. And I think it's a French author, but it's translated obviously into English because I'm not fluent in French. And it didn't change perspective. Like, it's about migrants coming over on the boats from France to England. And it starts from the perspective of the lady whose job it is to decide how many they can save from the water. And in the decision that she makes, there's obviously ones that are left in the sea and they sadly die. And so there's an investigation. So that's like the first part of the book. And the second part of the book is the story from the migrant's point of view. And it was just, I'm actually getting like shivers thinking about it. It's really thin as well. So if you want like a quick read, but powerful one. And it really changed, no, not changed the wrong word, because I had a view of like, gosh, these poor people. And that was probably about as deep as I went. And I was like her perspective, because her angle there is I had a job to do. And if I'd had one more person on this boat would have sunk. So what was the right thing to do there? But then also from the point of view of the migrants, and, you know, it is a really, it's one of those, it lingered with me for days afterwards, if not weeks. And I still think about it from time to time, because you forget in those situations, there's multiple people and lives caught up in it. And it's really, so I'd say that.
Interesting. It's a bit like I read The Beekeeper of Aleppo, and that's a similar right. Kind of thing, really. Yeah. So a people initiative you're most proud of, and one that you'd quietly do differently.
Most proud of, let me think. It's less an initiative, but I'm very proud of how I mean me and the EMEA lead, and me and the APAC lead, and the wider HR team as well, but handled the pandemic. And you remember that at that time, George Floyd as well. Two massive things to hit, and very different, obviously. But, you know, it wasn't an initiative. It wasn't anything we planned. But how we handled that across that part of the world was so human, and doing right by the people and the business, and taught me a lot. And I didn't always get it right. Yeah.
What's the one question nobody asks you and should?
Are you okay? Classic HR. Like, here we go. I'll even have colleagues that, you know, if we have restructures, to be like, oh, is this a time where you kind of come alive because, you know, it's your moment? And you're like, no, no. And very rarely, and that's actually when I know there's a sign of a true colleague and partner for me, is when somebody will say, are you okay? Because we can be in these rooms when we're talking about, it's not just restructures, but difficult conversations, or people have stuff going on in their personal life, and we're their first person they tell. So there's a lot there, and decompressing and whatever. And when somebody's like, are you okay? I think they should ask HR that more often. I think we should ask our colleagues that more often.
We should ask each other, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone should ask it and mean it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Complete this sentence. The bravest and most impactful thing any leader can do is?
Bravest and most impactful thing anybody. Allow space for silence. Yeah. Which is different to saying nothing, because sometimes you need to speak. So I don't even know if that's, I think you get what I mean.
I do.
I
speak a lot about silence.
Yeah. Just sit with it and observe a bit more. And that takes bravery, because your insecurity in your head is like, say something, otherwise, you know, you're rubbish at your job. I think that's pretty brave to do that and sit with it.
That's a great one. And if the next generation of female leaders could unlearn one thing from the generation before them, what would you want that to be?
Don't minimize yourself. I spent that early part of my career going into like giggly, like, I don't know, silly girl. Because they were so much older and men, and like, you know, had banter, and I didn't know what football they were talking about. I just found myself playing this role for probably about 18 months of just like, just like, what's my doing? And that was me minimizing myself. And I would say, don't do that.
Like that. Del, would you like to ask the final closing question?
Yeah, is there one thing from your past that you've never said out loud that quietly made you the leader you are today?
Gosh, let me think. I think my friendship group, my school, maybe it's because it's fresh in my mind, right? Because if people ask me that question, I would normally go to a boss I had a while back, and she's made a huge impact in my life. However, I think it might be because I'm fresh off the back of Marbella with my pals, and looking at these women, and that's only half the crew that I'm still in contact with. They've been there for the rises and falls, the firing the wrong person, you know, being the silly, like, I don't know what I'm doing. And they have championed time and time again. And I think, yeah, that has absolutely shit. Because I have all their voices in my head, right? Like, there's one of my friends just won't put up with rubbish. And so I'm like, well, what would she do? And I kind of pull on them as, like Inside Out, the film. I feel like I've got my school friends in my
it's
head.
like your internal board of directors.
Yeah, exactly. It is. They are sometimes a bit too much and they can back off. But like I'll lean on their strengths in my head and we champion each other and hold each other high. There's women holding women, but in the right way, without a gender.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed this, Kate. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Lovely thing to do on a Friday afternoon. It's just delightful. Thank you both so much.
It's lovely to meet you, Kate. Thank you so much for
you too.
For everything you do, as well as for showing up for our podcast. So.
Thank you. Thank you. And good luck with the podcast. It's, well done. It's a very brave thing to do. So well done.
Thanks.
And if you'd like more fascinating conversations like we've just had with Kate, please follow and subscribe to the podcast and share it with everybody you know. This has been The Sacred Art of Leadership, and we'll see you next time.